Chaos struck with unrelenting force the day Charlie Kirk was gunned down, sending shockwaves through the political world and leaving millions demanding immediate answers. Within just hours, the nation was told that the killer had been identified, arrested, and was already in custody. His name, Tyler Robinson. His face was broadcast on every major outlet. His alleged guilt was treated as fact. But behind the rush to provide closure, troubling questions began to surface, questions that grow louder with every passing day. Before we go deeper into this unraveling story, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the revelations still to come. When Tyler Robinson walked into custody, reports initially suggested he was cornered, broken, and suicidal. But eyewitness accounts and insider sources tell a very different story. Robinson allegedly made it clear he was not suicidal and that his decision to come forward was rooted in fear, not of punishment, but of being killed in a confrontation. He denied guilt outright, telling those around him that he wanted to live, that he had nothing to hide, and that he had not been anywhere near Utah Valley University on the day of the assassination. For a man accused of orchestrating a high-profile killing, his demeanor struck many as inconsistent with the portrait of a cold-blooded shooter. Instead, it painted him as confused, desperate, and possibly manipulated into becoming the face of a crime he insisted he did not commit. This early contradiction between what the public was told and what Robinson himself stated set the stage for a deeper unraveling of the official story. The silence of Robinson's parents quickly became one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. In high-profile tragedies, families often speak loudly, either to defend their loved one's innocence or to accept painful truths. But in this case, the parents vanished from the public eye almost as soon as the arrest was made. Insiders have claimed federal agents pressured the family into silence, warning them that speaking out could place their lives at risk. There were even reports suggesting that officials pushed the Robinsons toward witness protection, framing their silence not as a choice but as a matter of survival. For many observers, this silence felt less like caution and more like coercion. If the government's case was as strong as prosecutors claimed, why would Robinson's parents need to disappear into the shadows? What threat would silence protect them from? Their muting only deepened suspicion that the official narrative was not as airtight as authorities wanted the world to believe. Adding to the unease, Robinson's own family raised doubts about the identity of the figure captured on grainy surveillance footage. The video showed a person climbing down from a rooftop near the scene of the shooting, and prosecutors quickly claimed it was Robinson. Yet his parents and siblings reportedly said the figure only resembled him, but was not actually their son. That single claim cracked open a larger concern. If the very foundation of the case relied on visual evidence too blurry to confirm, then how could prosecutors claim certainty? In the absence of definitive footage placing Robinson at the scene, the case leaned heavily on circumstantial elements, each of which is now being scrutinized for reliability. One of the prosecution's strongest talking points was a series of text messages allegedly pulled from Robinson's phone. Officials suggested that these messages read like a confession, showing his intent and acknowledgement of responsibility. But digital forensics experts and defense attorneys quickly raised concerns. In the age of data manipulation, text can be altered, fabricated, or taken out of context. Robinson never stood before cameras and confessed. He never gave a written statement or verbal admission. Instead, the entirety of his so-called confession was reduced to a handful of lines of text on a screen, data whose authenticity remains in dispute. If the life of a young man and the truth behind a national tragedy hinge on contested text messages, the credibility of the entire prosecution comes into question. Beyond the texts, the physical evidence has proven equally shaky. The rifle said to be the murder weapon has been presented in multiple photos, yet inconsistencies in its condition, attachments, and even color have sparked widespread doubt. DNA results that were supposed to link Robinson directly to the weapon remain inconclusive, with no definitive report establishing a firm connection. Chain of custody issues raise further questions. Who handled the rifle, how it was recovered, and whether it could have been compromised before testing. With forensic standards demanding airtight processes, even small inconsistencies can dismantle the reliability of physical evidence. Here, the cracks appear large enough to shift the entire case. Surveillance footage, the kind the public expected would provide decisive clarity, offered little reassurance. Grainy, unclear, and never publicly authenticated, the images fall far short of the definitive proof authorities implied. At best, they show a figure whose identity cannot be confirmed. At worst, they represent an assumption presented as fact. Without conclusive footage of Robinson on the rooftop, aiming or firing a weapon, the narrative loses one of its strongest anchors. Instead, the public is left with ambiguity, an ambiguity that grows heavier with every unanswered question about the evidence. Then came one of the most explosive revelations in the case, and it didn't come from investigators or defense attorneys. It came from Candace Owens. Once cast aside by Charlie Kirk's organization, Owens reemerged to make a dramatic claim. She said Kirk himself had grown weary of being pressured by donors, that he wanted to pivot away from the pro-Israel stance that had defined much of his career, and that just 48 hours before his death, he had confided these thoughts to colleagues, a rabbi, and donors. Owens alleged Kirk was preparing to bring her back into the spotlight, signaling a bold new direction for Turning Point USA. Then, before such a move could materialize, he was dead. Her claims suggested a motive rooted not in random violence, but in political realignment, an ideological shift that powerful figures may not have wanted to see happen. What makes Owens' revelations even more unsettling is the timing. If Kirk was indeed preparing to alter the course of his organization and his alliances, his assassination becomes not just a tragedy, but a potential act of suppression. Owens framed her statement not as speculation but as a challenge, daring Turning Point USA to deny it outright. To date, no clear rebuttal has come. The possibility that Kirk's death was linked to political pressures rather than personal vendettas or random violence adds another layer of complexity and darkness to a case already thick with contradictions. Meanwhile, the silence from both Kirk's family and Robinson's continues to haunt observers. For Kirk's relatives, the absence of public demands for independent inquiries, autopsies, or investigations has fueled speculation that they too have been pressured or silenced. For Robinson's family, their lack of public defense remains a glaring void, one insiders attribute to federal influence. In a case where both families have reasons to speak yet remain muted, the silence itself becomes evidence of forces beyond public view shaping the narrative. Finally, scrutiny has turned toward Turning Point USA itself. Once seen as an unstoppable force in conservative activism, the organization now faces questions about finances, donor pressures, and its role in shaping or suppressing information related to Kirk's death. For an institution built on political influence, these questions cut to the core of its credibility. If the story of Robinson's guilt collapses, Turning Point may find itself at the center of one of the most damaging scandals in modern political history. As the case unfolds, one truth stands out above all others. The story presented to the public was neat, almost too neat. Yet every layer peeled back reveals contradictions, missing pieces, and unanswered questions. Was Tyler Robinson truly the gunman, or was he the decoy in a larger, more orchestrated plan? Did Charlie Kirk's decision to break with powerful donors seal his fate? And why have the families most directly affected been silenced when their voices should matter most? The answers remain elusive, but what is clear is that this case is about far more than one man's death. It is about trust in institutions, the fragility of truth in a digital age, and the power dynamics that can shape narratives at the highest levels. Until transparency replaces secrecy, suspicion will continue to grow. And in that suspicion, the demand for answers will only get louder. This story is far from over, and the silence surrounding it will not last forever. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next revelation.